Good evening, Facebook and YouTube. I'm Marcus from Inbalance Counselling here in Austral in Western Australia. It's Sunday, the 19th of March 2017, and we're just finishing up on Suicide Awareness Week, and the Black Dog Ride was held over the weekend. And to all the participants in that, I hope you had a great weekend, and I know that it's done a lot of good for the community, raising awareness against suicide in our local community and across Australia. This is the latest video in a series that I've been trying to put together on depression in men and boys, and last week we talked about how depression affects communication. This week I'd like to share with you my own experiences. Some of you are aware that I suffered with depression for quite some time as a result of childhood trauma, and I've learnt some invaluable lessons in how to deal with it throughout my life. I now manage my own depression completely medication free. That is not for everyone. I enjoy being medication free, but before you make any decision like that, you should seek extensive advice from your local GP and make sure that that's something that can work for you. Now, in my own battle with depression, I learnt that communication was the first and the most important thing that depression affected, well, in me certainly, and in many of the clients that I see, I find that communication is the biggest thing to suffer. What many people don't know is the effects that having your ability to communicate on meaningful levels and communicate articulately what you actually feel and what you want in a rational sense. Many people don't understand just how badly that can damage your ability to have a normal life. Now, some of the things that went wrong for me, I'm just going to list out. There's only 4 major ones. Now, they would be anger, fear, pessimism and procrastination. And we have covered a few of those topics in previous videos, but I'd like to go over them in depth and how they affected my life especially. Now, anger is a really prevalent thing in men and boys where it comes to depression. Anger is usually associated with some trauma that you've suffered within your life, some wrong that's been done to you. It doesn't matter whether it's a perceived or a rational wrong that's been done to you or trauma that's happened to you. It's how you perceive it, and anger is one of the key ingredients in the start of that downward spiral into more and more significant amounts of depression. Many men and many boys grow up believing in sort of a natural justice where things should, good things should happen to good people. And if you've been wronged, someone should be there to right that wrong. And a lot of the time, natural justice doesn't necessarily get meted out for people with depression. And that plays into that decision-making, that already degraded decision-making process, because again, when you are working in anger, you've started to work in reaction rather than proactivity. You've gone back into that amygdala state, that reptile brain, where you're just making decisions on the fly, and it's the start of a slippery slope. And for me, anger just played. It was a part of my life, an integral part of my life, for more years than I can count. Now, anger plays very well into fear. You tend to be afraid about almost everything. You're afraid about what tomorrow will bring. You're afraid about what people will think of you, what your spouse thinks of you, what your kids think of you. And then you become afraid to make decisions because you've already started making decisions in anger, and you've made a couple of very bad decisions, or even mildly bad decisions. And fear starts to either stop you making decisions or pressure you into making more wrong decisions. And that anger and that fear then play very, very well into pessimism. You start expecting bad things to happen to you. You start expecting the worst. You start to fixate on bad things happening to you, the possibility of bad things happening to family members, and you start to fear that. It starts to become an oppressive gloom, an oppressive doom that sits with you on a daily basis. And that's that. You heard that the other week when we were talking about the actual definitions of depression, where in the wiki definition they talk about that doom, gloom, that oppressive fear that sits on you. And finally, those three, anger, fear and pessimism, play really, really well into procrastination. And that is a quadrilla of really horrendous effects. With procrastination, you will just put off decisions. You'll put off talking to people who are important to you, regardless to whether they can help you or not. You'll put off talking to people you owe money. You'll put off talking to the government. You'll put off life in general because you're afraid. You're afraid of making decisions because you're afraid of making the wrong decision. You've got that constant pessimism where you're expecting the next decision you make to be the wrong decision. And there are horrendous consequences for all these things in your life: anger, fear, pessimism and procrastination. In my own life, in decisions I made with regards to, for example, my separation and access to my children, the ability to make good decisions in my right mind at the time was compromised, and that cost me quite a great deal of time and a great deal of grief, and that's something you can't get back. But when you learn to deal with depression, when you learn that it doesn't have to control your life, you can start setting goals towards making strides back to making good decisions, to healing those wounds, and to getting into a place where you can make proactive decisions, where you're thinking of the future and you're expecting every day to be better, not for every decision you make to be wrong. Now, having just finished up talking about it's Suicide Prevention Week and Suicide Awareness Week, when you feel that oppressive gloom, when you feel that oppressive anger, when you expect bad things to happen to you, and you're in that depressive state, that's where men get really, really at risk. Now, men, boys, anyone who's watching this, women included, if you're out there and you're feeling anger, if you're out there and you're feeling fear, if you're pessimistic about tomorrow, if you're putting off decisions about everything, life in general, it doesn't matter whether you talk to me, a counsellor, or you talk to a psychologist, a psychiatrist, or you just go and see your GP. There are people out there, family members, friends, who care deeply about you and want to see you succeed and want to see you alive and happy and with a brighter future for tomorrow. Make the first step. Reach out, ask someone to help you. Depression is a totally treatable condition which you do not have to have for life. Make the call, guys. This is In Balance Counselling signing off. Hope you have a great weekend. All the best.